Hello all, this is James Johnson, aka Sulfurblade, and I am here to dabble in politics once more. Um, every now and then something happens in the political spectrum that is really, really important and exciting, and I feel the need to go ahead and bring that information forth. And well, Donald Trump has done something really great. Maybe one of the best single little small pieces of governance that he's done in this term of his. And I'm all for it. Since this has been released, which is basically his executive his executive order, and it's aimed at targeting free speech on college campuses. Obviously, this is for the United States. Trump doesn't have any authority outside of the U.S. So, if you're a left-leaning person and you like censorship on your campuses and you do not live in the United States, well, you're in luck then. But if you are in the United States, the era, or, well, I shouldn't say it's coming to an end, but it's at least having a particular blow dealt to it. So this has been, since it's been released, the executive order has been made out to be bad inside of traditional news outlets. And of course, these traditional news outlets are our, for lack of better words, fake news. This is left agenda, left-leaning politics interfering with the course of bringing forth good news. Sadly, the news outlets have been infested with left-leaning personnel and or interests and or companies and so on and so forth. So, rather than try to put a spin on this, let's just go ahead and read it. Because if you can read it for yourself, you can make an assessment of what the words mean with your own brain and your own determination. Most of these media outlets do not actually give the executive order. They don't show it for you to read it so you can make an educated opinion yourself. They fail to report the actual words of the executive order. They just talk about how it's going to be bad. That is not objective news, but I digress. Let's get back to reading this, shall we? By the authority invested in me as president, by the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America, it is hereby ordered as follows. Section 1. Purpose. The purpose of this order is to enhance the quality of post-secondary education by making it more affordable, more transparent, and more accountable. Institutions of higher education, should be accountable both for student outcomes and for student life on campus. In particular, my administration seeks to promote free and open debate on college and university campuses. Free inquiry is an essential feature of our nation's democracy, and it promotes learning, scientific discovery, and economic prosperity. We must encourage institutions to appropriately account for this bedrock principle in their administration of student life and to avoid creating environments that stifle competing perspectives, thereby potentially impeding beneficial research and undermining learning. The financial burden of higher education on students and their families is also a national problem that needs immediate attention. Over the past 30 years, college tuitions and fees have grown at more than twice the rate of the Consumer Price Index. Rising student loan debt coupled with low repayment rates threaten the financial health of both individuals and families, as well as of federal student loan programs. In addition to many programs of study fail to prepare students for success in today's job market. The federal government can take meaningful steps to address these problems, selecting an institution and course of study. Okay, give me a second here. Important decisions for prospective students and significantly affect long-term earnings. Institutions should be transparent about the average earning and loan repayment rates of former students who receive federal student aid. Additionally, the federal government should make this information readily accessible to the public and to prospective students and their families in particular. This order will promote greater access to critical information regarding the prices and outcomes of post-secondary education, thereby furthering the goals of the National Council for American Workers established by Executive Order 13845 of July 19, 2018, establishing the President's National Council for American Worker. Increased information disclosure will help ensure that individuals make educational choices suited to their needs, interests, and circumstance. Access to this information will also increase institutional accountability and encourage institutions to take into account likely future earnings when establishing the cost of their educational programs. Section 2. Policy. It is the policy of the federal government to A. Encourage institutions to foster environments that promote open, intellectually engaging, and diverse debate, including through compliance with the First Amendment for public institutions and compliance with stated institutional policies regarding freedom of speech for private institutions. B. Help students, including workers seeking additional training, and their families understand through better data and career counseling that not all institutions, degrees, or fields of study provide similar returns on their investment, and consider that their educational decisions should account for the opportunity cost of enrolling in a program. C. Align the incentives of institutions with those of students and taxpayers to ensure the institutions share the financial risk associated with federal student loan programs. D. Help borrowers avoid defaulting on their federal student loans by educating them about risks, repayment obligations, and repayment options. E. Supplement efforts by the states and institutions by disseminating information to assist students in completing their degree faster and at lower cost. Section 3. Improving free inquiry on campus. A. To advance the policy described in subsection 2A of this order, the heads of covered agencies shall, in coordination with the Director of the Office of Management and Budget, take appropriate steps in a manner consistent with applicable law, including the First Amendment, to ensure institutions that receive federal research or education grants promote free inquiry, including through compliance with all applicable federal laws, regulations, and policies. B. Covered agencies for the purposes of this section are the Department of Defense, the Department of the Interior, the Department of Agriculture, the Department of Commerce, the Department of Labor, the Department of Health and Human Services, the Department of Transportation, the Department of Energy, and the Department of Education, the Environmental Protection Agency, the National Science Foundation, and the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. C. Federal research or education grants for purposes of this section include all funding provided by a covered agency directly to an institution, but do not include funding associated with federal student aid programs that cover tuition fees, or stipends. Section 4. Improving transparency and accountability on campus. A. To advance the policy described in subsection 2B through E of this order, the Secretary of Education shall, to the extent consistent with applicable law. Okay, and there's a lot here about the specifics of dealing with repayment of student loans. I'm just gonna scroll through them. If this is something you're interested in reading, you can, but for the purposes of this video, I mainly wanted to highlight the part about free speech in colleges, but obviously there's more to this executive order than just that. And you should be able to read it if you want, so I'm just going to scroll through it gradually. You, of course, can freeze the video and be able to read it at your leisure. Hmm. Well, there's just a little bit that's cut off there. Sorry about that, guys. Alright, so we're just going to scroll back up and we'll leave it sit there. Now, let's do a little bit of evaluation of what this executive order really means. I've heard some people say that this executive order doesn't give enough specifics. It, according to some people I've heard, they'd like to hear the National Guard brought in to enforce blah blah blah, and they want to see, actual specific cases being used as examples. And that's all good and great, but I think what these people are missing here is that this is the executive branch. This is the President of the United States, who is, by all he's operating kind of the fringe of his purview. So the president can make an executive order in times of crisis. If there's something credible that needs to be acted upon. The president is not a lawmaking part of our legislature. That is the legislative branch. They make laws. Of course, the courts can kind of alter laws and challenge law and change it to what it needs to be based off of interpretation. But the president has limited ability in what he can and can't do, and he certainly can't call in the National Guard to enforce an executive order whenever he wants. It's calling up the National Guard is a little more difficult than a violation of free speech on campus. Why do I think that this is a good thing? Because it's a good first step. It gets the ball rolling. It gets the narrative thrown into the light. It begins the conversation. It is now a bona fide political issue, and now something has to be done about it. This executive order may end up being challenged by individuals, and it may end up in the Supreme Court, in which case it will get far more specific if it makes it to that point. Or Congress could decide in their next words are failing me today. In the next time Congress gets together, for lack of a more educational way of saying that, they could make law to the order of the purposes of this executive order, thus superseding it. So by this being a good start, it really is. It's a good start. It shines a light on a problem, and now politicians need to address said problem. I don't claim to be a fervent supporter of Donald Trump, and I don't claim to be a fervent non-supporter of Donald Trump either. I am not a person invested in hating him, and I am not a person invested in loving him. I feel that he's a president who demands respect, like any other president we've ever had, and to that extent, I'm a little bit disgraced by many of my fellow Americans' treatment of our commander-in-chief. So, with that being said, I'm very happy that he has brought this issue to the forefront of our ability to have a conversation about it. This is an important conversation because it is not fair to have the institutions of learning, the institution where conversations need to happen from, and these conversations need to be non-biased. They need to be from all sides of the political spectrum and or socio-economic spectrum. If there is a place where conversations that are out of the ordinary should be ordinary, and that is where that should happen is on universities and colleges. If you want to know what Marxism is, you should be having that conversation there. If you want to know what socialism is, that should be a conversation there. If you want to know all of these various things that may be considered to be fringe and or fanatical, extreme, universities are the places to learn these things. And what makes them extreme? Why are they fanatical? Well, why was fascist government a very fanatical form of right ideology? Why aren't we breaking down what Hugo Chavez did in Venezuela in the universities? Why aren't we talking about important conversations that should be happening on our university? Why is the country on a whole in the middle of identity politics? The main issues that get discussed on the internet these days are not issues. We don't talk about issues anymore. We talk about ideas. We talk about feminism. But feminism isn't an issue. I mean, for the Marxist type left, it's an issue. And why is it an issue? Because it gives them some sort of political power. If they can convince enough people that their bizarre ideology premises are correct, and they can ensnare enough people in these beliefs, then by the mere fact that they prescribe to the left, then the masses should prescribe to the left, and therefore expanding the power base of the left on the issues. But the issues have no correlation to feminism. The issues have no correlation to ageism. The issues have no correlation to any of the isms that partake in identity politics. Gun control is not an ism. It's an actual topic. Immigration is not an ism. It's an actual relevant political topic. Actual relevant political topics are no longer talked about. They're glossed over. They're forgotten about. Instead, we have extremists on the far right and far left throwing barbs and jabs across the world of the internet, through media sources, condemning each other for being vile and barbaric people. The left promoting censorship and the shutting down of ideas, and the right championing free speech. But why? Why has the world gone topsy-turvy? It used to be the left that championed free speech and the right that was about censorship. We've gone full circle. We're now on top of we've done a somersault, and now we're standing on our head within the course of the last 40 years. And that's because then conservatives were in power and they didn't want certain principles to be brought and shed to light. Now the left is in power by some accounts, and they don't want certain information to be brought to light. Venezuela. Venezuela is one of the clearest examples of the left fails. Hugo Chavez, according to Bernie Sanders, was a great man. The left had high praise for Hugo Chavez when he took control of Venezuela. And he went in and he created a socialist state that, for a while, looked like a dream of any left-leaning Democrat. He created more social programs and brought more equality of outcome and all these equitable buzzwords you hear talked about. He pushed out the capitalists, and he created fairness across the entire spectrum of people within his country. And what did it get Venezuela? Where's Venezuela now? Not doing so well, guys. They're doing, quite frankly, they're the poorest country in the world right now, and they used to be the richest country in all of South America. Hugo Chavez was loved by his people for the things that he did. But when he did it, he was funding all of these programs. He was funding them off of oil. And he could do it because oil was at all-time record highs. So oil was worth a lot of money, and Venezuela is the land that has the most oil of anywhere on the planet. So Venezuela was very rich and was capable of funding a whole slew of social programs. But that could not be done in perpetuity. Oil prices plummeted, and now the country's poor. And now they don't know how to deal with it. They don't know how to get out of with it. You have his Maduro, who was his Democrat, his self-appointed successor, the person that could continue Hugo Chavez's work. You see him trying to create a dictatorship. He's taking what used to be a democracy. Well, Hugo Chavez started this, but Venezuela used to be a democratic nation. And since Chavez started to take away some of those democratic liberties, and Maduro, he's attempting to basically solidify his hold as a dictator. All while still trying to maintain this quote-unquote socialist facade that can't be afforded. People are starving in Venezuela. Things have gone from wonderful 40 years ago to just horrible. And that is one very clear example of what the left did for Venezuela. Now, is that to mean that all left-leaning people are crazy and that if we elect them, that's what's going to happen to us? If we elect Bernie Sanders, we're going to end up just like Venezuela? No, probably not. The U.S. does have a fair amount of checks and balances to keep that type of situation from happening. So, just like I wasn't concerned when Donald Trump was elected, I wouldn't be that concerned if Bernie Sanders got elected because there's only so much the president can do. He can't create as much change as would be needed, like happened in Venezuela, because Venezuela didn't have the same types of checks and balances within its system to keep a president from being able to get complete and utter control the way that Chavez and Maduro did. But that doesn't mean that left-leaning management ideas for the country couldn't have similar socioeconomic results. You took a very rich country that was filled with money from oil from one source, but it didn't matter. It was still money that could be put into these wonderful social programs. And the wonderful social programs can no longer be maintained because they don't have the money to maintain them. Well, that is part of the problem in the U.S., isn't it? We have a deficit, and our deficit continues to grow. And why do we have a deficit? Well, there's many reasons. There's wars we still need to pay for, but one of the big reasons we have a deficit is because we have a whole slew of different programs that are currently on the books that we need to pay for. We have our own alphabet soup of social programs, and these are not helping us. And the Democrats would love to create more alphabet soup. But for some reason, parts of our country just don't, they can't understand that alphabet soup isn't necessarily good for the welfare of our country. People are concerned with the welfare of themselves. What can line my own pockets? And oftentimes, for the poorest amongst us, political programs that bring some sort of financial aid or this type of aid or that type of aid that are championed by the Democratic Party, well, they seem very appealing. But what do we all know as Americans? We all know that America is going broke. Well, it is broke. It's been broke. We have been, printing out more and more money, and our inflation has been getting worse and worse. And we no longer back our currency with gold and or silver. Nixon did away with that long ago. And yeah, here we are. Our deficit is spiraling out of control, and we really need to be doing something. Government needs to be acting. Has Trump acted enough on this crisis that would make me happy? No, he hasn't. So, like I said in the beginning of this conversation, I'm not a Trump supporter, nor am I a Trump hater. Do I think Hillary would have acted better than what Trump has? No, I don't think so. I don't think that's either. I don't think any of the people that could have possibly been elected would have really done anything about the deficit. Not unless we could, somehow bring a former president back to get past the limitation of how many terms a president can have, and then somehow put someone like Bill Clinton back in office. I'm a Republican, but mind you, and I just said, yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing a Bill Clinton back in office because, to be honest, Bill Clinton is one of the few presidents in the past 40 years that has done anything about putting any type of dent in our national deficit. And I appreciated him for that. Oftentimes, the issues today are are all the wrong issues. We get hung up on buzzword issues like climate change. We get hung up on fake issues like feminism. We get hung up on all of this crap. But right now, our way of life is under siege. We are, in many variables, no longer the number one country in the world. China is passing us up on multiple different fronts. And if history is to be taken into account, oftentimes uh, when the leading country in the world is challenged for its place in the world as the number one dominant country, it has more than not resulted in war. Spain, England, Germany. You can go back in history, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, well, thousands of years, and you can see that any time a country has risen to challenge another country, it has almost always resulted in some type of war. And I'm not sitting here trying to call out doom and gloom, because maybe we've progressed beyond that, but it's something to be cognizant of. China's, 1/3 of the entire world's population. It's a big country, and it's industrially bigger than us. It has the capacity to outproduce us in military equipment. Why did the U.S. come in and become such great force in World War II? It's because the U.S. had an industrial base that most European nations couldn't even fathom. We were able to make so many tanks and so many airplanes and so much war equipment that, well, we could throw Shermans at the problem. For every German tank, there was 100 American tanks. And, well, I don't know what you know about history, but German tanks were pretty darn good. Our Shermans weren't necessarily up to snuff with them, but when you have 100 on one odds, those are pretty overwhelming odds, no matter how much better the tank was that the Germans made. So, I'm getting way off topic of this executive order, but anyway, let's get back to the topic of what we should be talking about, and that is free speech. Free speech is something that should be cherished and protected, and as such, this is one of the best orders I've seen Donald Trump put into place while he's been governing. The young Americans coming out of college are our future. They are the ones most likely to be able to eventually right this ship. That is, of course, if they have the knowledge to right this ship. So, what I mean by that is, if we continue to put to the forefront individuals who believe in alphabet soup, who believe in increasing the budget, the federal budget, by creating more government programs, and by creating more government aid, and by handing out more handouts to the American people, that deficit spending is okay, then we're never going to get out of this problem that we're in. Do I think we're ever going to get out of this problem we're in right now? I'm highly skeptical. I think we're so far in debt that, well, there's no way for us to declare bankruptcy. But we're as bankrupt as many Americans have been. At least Americans have had the ability to file chapter or whatever to try to get out of it. We don't have such a luxury. If the United States was trying to file for bankruptcy, the 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 ramifications for the rest of the world would be great indeed. Even China would feel the implications massively, and China doesn't want that either. It's the reason China buys up so much of our debt, not just so that they can lord it over us like they already do, but because they know quite well that you need, at least for now, a strong American economy in place to keep the whole house of cards from crashing in on itself. So, free speech, maybe the most important of all necessities inside of the United States that allow for political discourse. Without the ability to call each other idiots, we can't move forward. That's not to say I approve of everyone calling each other idiots. I don't. I think the free speech done right is when we don't resort to name calling, when we recognize the differences within each other, and we come to compromises for the greater good. This is something I haven't seen done in politics for many years. Right now, politics seems to be how extreme you can be on each side and how you can obstruct the other side from getting anything done. That is politics as we know it, and it's not good. Democrats and Republicans need to learn how to work together instead of working against each other. And if there's any place that can teach young Americans to start working together, it's our universities and colleges. But as long as one large group of Americans going through college feel like they are silenced, that they cannot work together with the ruling side, being the left, then you're not going to ever get to the point where you can have a conversation and work can be done together to make things better. And I think that this is one small step towards getting there. Is it a perfect executive order? No. Is it a good executive order? Hell yeah. Is it far better than what the media is making it out to be? Absolutely. So that's where we are. That's what this executive order is, and I salute Donald Trump for putting it into place. Anyway, I'm I'm James Johnson, aka Sulfurblade. This is my channel. I hope you appreciate my content. Please leave a like, subscribe, and feel free to call me an idiot down below in the comments section. But until next time, peace, and have a great day.